بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين آمين. We have reached the chapter of verbs. So basically we completed I'rab, inflection, the chapter of I'rab, and we have reached the chapter of verbs. The author, rahimahullah, says Al-Af'alu Thalatha. Al-Af'alu Thalathatun Madin wa Mudari'un wa Amrun. Nahu daraba wa yadribu wa idrib. Verbs are of three types: past tense, imperfect, and imperative, such as he hit, he hits, and he hit. Or he hits and hits. So basically, he hit is past tense, right? He hit someone. He hits is imperfect or present tense, future tense, present continuous. He hits, like he is currently in the process of hitting. And hit is an imperative, is a command, meaning you tell someone to hit something. I know this is maybe a violent example, but this is the example. This is the example that the author, rahimahullah, provides, and I think the reason why the old scholars use this example a lot is because the students were young, so they wanted to scare them to study. So always keep keep them on their toes and like make sure that they're always paying attention in class.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah. So what is a verb? A verb is indicates an action, right? When you say a verb, you think of an action, and verbs actually have three components. The first component is the time component, or the first component is the action component, that which takes place, and the second component is the time component, and the third component is its attachment to the doer, right? Its attachment to the subject, because a verb cannot be without a subject, right? A verb needs to have a verbal subject, unlike a noun, which is completely sovereign, independent. It does not have to be basically tied to anything, right? Muhammad. When you say Muhammad, you automatically understand or realize I'm talking about the particular person who has the name Muhammad. But when I say he hit, or when I say hits, you understand the action itself, right? You understand the action, and you also understand the fact that it is a present tense action, meaning it's happening right now. But there's also there's another component. This action needs to be performed by someone, right? So it has all these three components. Its attachment to the subject, its tense, meaning at which point in time is this verb taking place, or has it taken place, or will it take place, and the action itself, the meaning of the action itself. What does hitting mean in itself, right? So the first thing that the author talks about is the time aspect of verbs, right? So he says a verb is either past tense or present future. Mudara is a present future tense verb, but I see in all the books of grammar that have been translated to English that they use the imperfect verb for mudara. So that is why I'm using imperfect here as well. But mudara is a verb that is either happening now or will happen in the future. Wa amr is a verb that is imperative, meaning it's a command, like the example that the author gives is hit, right? Daraba wa yadribu wa idrib, right? And then the author says فالماضي مفتوح الآخر أبدا. Now after the author tells us the time component or the time aspect of verbs. He tells us about the time and the time aspect of verbs. He starts telling us about the what comes at the end of verbs. So he's trying to tell us whether verbs or can be inflected or not, right? And he says فالماضي مفتوح الآخر أبدا. He says the past tense verb always has a fatha at its end. So if a word has an ending that is constant, meaning that is fixed and does not change, would you say that the word takes inflections? So regardless of what comes before this past tense verb, it never changes. It always has a fatha. Does this tell you that this word accepts inflection or does not accept inflection? Is it a
Does not.
Oh, it does not, right? Because what was the definition of inflections? It was the changing of the end, right from the beginning. It was the changing of the end of words, right? So if a word's ending does not change, it means it is not mu'arab, or it is not a word that can be inflected. So that's what the author is telling us here. فَالْمَاضِي مَفْتُوحُ الْآخِرِ أَبَدًا. And the past tense verb will always have a fatha at the end, right? So we say that this is a non-declinable word. The past tense verb is a non-declinable word that always ends with a fatha. If you guys want to write notes, write this down. The madi, or the past tense verb, is a non-declinable or non-declinable verb, or declinable. I need to figure out how to pronounce this. Verb that always ends with a fatha. وَالْأَمْرُ مَجْزُومٌ أَبَدًا. And the author says the imperative is always majzoom. What does that mean? If the imperative or the word or the verb that indicates a command always has the inflection of jazm, does that tell you it can be inflected? Does that tell you that it is declinable or non-declinable?
Non-declinable.
Non-declinable, yes, because it always has a jazm at the end. The Arab does not change. So from these two statements, we know that the past tense verb and the imperative are non-declinable verbs, right? And then the last one is al-mudara', the present future tense. And the author says, وَالْمُضَارِعُ مَا كَانَ فِي أَوَّلِهِ إحدى الزوائد الأربع يجمعها قولك أنيت. يجمعها قولك أنيت. He says, and the imperfect verb is one that has one of the four extra letters attached to its end. Anaytu. I don't know why the formatting got messed up. Okay. Yeah, I need to figure out why the formatting. Let me just fix this real quick. Okay. So, and the imperfect verb is one that has one of the four extra letters attached to its beginning that are gathered in the saying anaitu. Basically, this anaitu here, this word, how is it pronounced? It's pronounced anaitu. Okay. Now these four extra letters are all combined or included in this word, meaning Hamza. The first one is Hamza, the second one is Noon, the third one is a Ya, the fourth one is a Ta, right? So that is what a mudara verb, like I said, a mudara verb, an imperfect verb will always have one of these four letters at the beginning. But with the caveat, or what you need to understand, is that not every word that starts with these letters is necessarily a mudara verb, right? And that is where context comes into play. And your knowledge of Arabic vocabulary comes into play. But at least this gets you closer to knowing whether something is a verb or not. And the author says, وَهُوَ مَرْفُوعٌ أَبَدًا حَتَّى يَدْخُلُ عَلَيْهِ نَاصِبٌ أَوْ جَازِمٌ. And the imperfect verb al-mudara is always marfu', but it doesn't end here until an agent of nasab or an agent of jazm comes before it. Meaning, if an agent of nasab comes before a mudara verb, it becomes mansub. If an agent of jazm comes before a mudara verb, it becomes majzum. But as long as we don't have any of these two agents, it will remain marfu'. Now, the question to you is: a mudara verb a marfu' or is it declinable or non-declinable? That's my question to you. Is it declinable or non-declinable based on what the author said? Not a trick question. Brother Marajul, I think you're muted.
It's declinable since at times it could be marfu or nasab or jazm.
Exactly. So from all the verbs, only the mudara verb is declinable. Every other verb is non-declinable. So this is something I want you to memorize. Only the mudara verb is declinable, and there are certain reasons. The scholars have mentioned why a verb becomes a mudara or an imperfect verb becomes declinable, and because by default verbs are supposed to be non-declinable, but mudara breaks the rules and is declinable. So inshallah, but that is too advanced for this class. I won't use our time to explain why that is, inshallah. But in our next the next books that we read, inshallah, we will discuss that. Okay, any questions so far? So the author now takes us straight to the agents of nasab. It's very beautiful the way he transitions between different chapters and between different parts of the same chapter is very clever. It's very meaningful. So here, because he started talking about the agents of nasab and jazm, he immediately go in the next section. He starts telling us about the agents of nasab. So someone may ask, okay, now we know the imperfect verb becomes mansub when an agent of nasab comes before it, but you have to explain to us what an agent of nasab is, right? You have told us what nasab is, what the i'rab nasab is, and you have told us what the mudara verb is, what the imperfect verb is, but you have not told us what these agents are. Now the author tells us what the agents are, and he says, فَالنَّوَاصِبُ عَشَرَةٌ وَهِيَّ. The agents of nasab are 10, and they are. So basically, the agent of nasab, just to recap, I think we mentioned this previously, but quickly, just to recap, the agent of nasab, if they come before a verb, they make it mansub, or meaning they change the i'rab of that verb to nasab. As we said, if a verb does not have any agents before it, it is marfu'. It is always marfu'. But an agent of nasab, if it comes before a verb, it makes it mansub. It gives it the i'rab of nasab. It changes the i'rab of the verb. As is the case with all agents. For example, an agent of jazm would give the verb the i'rab of jazm, right? So it's kind of the definition of an agent of nasab is included in the name itself. So what's the first one that the author tells us? The first agent of nasab is an, which translates to. It means to. Okay. For example, Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَأَن تصبروا خير لكم. And if you're patient, or to be patient is better for you. To be patient is better for you. Or I translated it. This should be أن تصوموا خير لكم. عفوا. Allah Azza wa Jal says, if you fast, it is better for you. To fast is better for you. To fast is better for you. And this is mentioned in the chapter of Baqarah when Allah Azza wa Jal tells us about the month of Ramadan and why someone can, or what are some of the valid excuses someone can skip fasting. And at the end he says, to fast is better for you.
Yeah.
So that is an agent of nasab. Now let's figure out why that becomes an agent of nasab. Tasumu is one of the 5 verbs. Okay, and we said the 5 verbs. How do we make the 5 verbs mansub? Does anyone remember? Or let me ask you a different question. How do we make the 5 verbs marfu? What is the sign of what is the sign that when you see the sign you know that this verb is marfu?
Dammatin. It should have an inflection of dammatin. Or noon.
Noon. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Noon. Yes. Exactly. So, but we don't see a noon, right? Why? Because when you make one of the 5 verbs mansub, the noon is removed. What is the sign of a 5 verb being mansub? What is the sign of one of the 5 verbs being mansub?
The omission of the noon.
The omission of noon. So here, tasumu, originally it was tasumuna with a noon, but we have removed the noon and replaced it with an alif. And this is just a matter of writing it. So alif does not indicate anything grammatically or when it comes to inflection. It's just in the Quran, whenever we see that the noon is removed, there's an alif in its place. But it's purely, it has to do with writing. It does not have to do with meaning nor grammar. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
Sheikh. Sheikh, I have a question. Sheikh, on our slide, it's written that the omission of the noon applies. I mean, the note goes like this: 5 verbs whose sign of rafa is the existence of noon.
Mm-hmm.
So, this omission of the noon applies to those 5 verbs only, or any other verbs?
No, just the 5 verbs, because noon becomes a sign of rafa only for the 5 verbs. That therefore the emission of noon becomes the sign of jazm or nasab only for those verbs.
Okay, Sheikh. Then it leads to another question. For rafa, under the noon, it was written that imperfect verb with dual noun or plural noun or second person feminine noun attached to it. So should it be imperfect verb or just those five verbs?
Yeah, so so when we say the imperfect verb, when those things are attached to it, basically that's the explanation of the 5 verbs. So the 5 verbs have those pronouns attached to it. Does that so basically that's what the author, like I said, he uses a lot of things for just to make it more clear. So sometimes we'll call these just purely the 5 verbs, and sometimes he will tell you the definition or the explanation of these 5 verbs, and here he tells you the explanation of them, like how do you know. So what is it that makes one of the 5 verbs different than the others? What makes them different is that these pronouns are attached to its end, or
so
to
that
their
makes end. Those imperfect verb those specific 5 exceptional verbs.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Okay. And the next agent of nasab is lan. Lan is the next agent of nasab. فإن لم تفعلوا ولن تفعلوا واتقوا النار التي وقودها الناس والحجارة وعدت للكافرين. And if you do not And if you are not able to, you will never be able to. And if you do, and if you did not do so, you will never be able to do so. And fear the nar, and fear the fire, which uses humans and rocks as its fuel. Na'udhu billah, may Allah protect us from this fire. Or أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ, and it has been prepared for those who do not believe. Now here Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us, after he challenged the Arabs to come up with something like the Quran, he tells them, and if you did not do so, if you have not done so until now, know that you will never be able to do so. This is the miracle of the Prophet ﷺ, and no one can come up with anything like it. So the thing I want to draw your attention to is lan, which is the agent of nasab that we are talking about here, and what the verb that comes after it. Again, taf'aluna is one of the 5 verbs, but the noon is omitted here. Why is the noon omitted? Because before it there is
Agent of nasab.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, got it.
If you did not, you will not. I translated the first part. If you did not, you will not. Or if you have not, you will never. The third agent of nasab is idhan. Idhan. For example, and idhan means then. For example, you say to someone, adrusu, I will study, or I study. And he told you, idhan tanjaha, then you will succeed, then you will pass. You see how then is used here? Then you will pass, meaning it indicates what that verb which is mentioned previously leads to. So meaning studying leads to what? Leads to success, leads to passing. Now here, what I want you to pay attention to is this ha. What is the inflection of this ha? What is the haraka? First of all, what is the haraka of this ha?
Fatha.
Fatha. And we know this is one of the 5 verbs because it starts with a ta. And also we know this is one of the 5 verbs because one of the agents of nasab comes before it, right?
Yes.
And we said the agent of nasab makes the imperfect verb mansub. And here, this is not, I'm sorry, this is not one of the 5 verbs. This is an imperfect verb. I apologize.
Due to the fatha.
Yeah. So this is one of the imperfect verbs, but not one of the 5 verbs. And the i'rab or the nasab of an imperfect verb that is not one of the 5 verbs is using fatha, right? Is using fatha. So or how the i'rab, how do you make it mansub? That's what I mean. How do you make one of the imperfect verb mansub? That is, and this imperfect verb is not one of the 5 verbs. We give the haraka of fatha to it. So that is one of the signs of nasab for the imperfect verb.
Sheikh.
Yes.
Sheikh, the definition was imperfect verb with agent of nasab before it, and which has nothing attached to its end.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain this once again? Nothing attached to its end.
Yeah. So basically, remember when the author explained the 5 verbs to us, he said that either the dual pronoun or the plural pronoun or the feminine singular feminine pronoun is attached to its end. So when we say the imperfect verb that has nothing attached to its end, meaning it has none of those pronouns attached to its end.
Sheikh, are those alif, waw, and ya?
Yes, exactly. They're alif.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Got it.
Very good. Yeah. So again, idhan is the agent of nasab, and tanjaha is an imperfect verb that has nothing attached to its end. Therefore, it becomes mansub using a fatha. And that is what we see here. We see a fatha. K is the fourth one. Ma afa Allahu. K means so, in order. Okay. What is the example that I bring as one of the verses of the Quran? Allah Azza wa Jalla says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. ما أفاء الله على رسوله من أهل القرى فلله وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم. Whatever Allah Azza wa Jal brings or gives to grants to his prophet, then that is for Allah, meaning it should be spent for the sake of Allah, meaning building masajid or whatever that it takes to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It should be spent for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not accept sadaqahs. To just and basically his livelihood needed to be taken care of somehow, right? وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى, for the orphans, for the close ones, وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, and for the poor and the needy, وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ, and for the travelers, so that it does not become so this wealth does not remain in the hands of only the rich people, right? So Allah Azza wa Jal is telling us what are some of the wisdoms behind wealth being distributed amongst the poor and amongst the needy. So I mean that's a different. But what I want to draw your attention to is كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ. كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ. Here we see a K, right? K is what? K is one of the agents of nasab, which this is the agent that we're talking about right now, that we're discussing. La yakuna. La is a particle, but yakuna is one of the is an imperfect verb. Yakuna is an imperfect verb, and don't confuse this noon with the noon of the 5 verbs. And this noon is not a sign of rafa, but rather this is part of the verb itself. This noon is one of the letters of the verb itself. So yakuna is an imperfect verb that has nothing attached to its end. How do we make it mansub in that case? What is the sign of nasab for an imperfect verb that does not have anything attached to its end?
Fatha.
Exactly. So we have fatha here. Right?
Yeah. Sheikh, does the la has anything to do with this?
So la is actually does not change the outward inflection. La purely indicates a negation here. Okay. So that it is not. That's what it means. So that it is not. So that not part is indicated by the la, but it does not change the inflection. Okay. We call this la an-nafiya. La an-nafiya is a particle that only changes the meaning but does not change the inflection.
Sheikh, it negates the meaning.
It negates, yeah. It negates.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
And the fifth agent of nasab, inshallah, we'll conclude with this one, is lam kay, meaning there's a lam that many times comes before k, and that lam, if itself also becomes a sign of nasab. Itself also becomes a sign of nasab, and it has pretty much the same meaning. It has pretty much the same meaning. تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان على عبده ليكون للعالمين نذيرا. Blessed is the one who sent down the distinguisher or the Quran upon his servant, meaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that he becomes a warner for the universe, so that he becomes a warner for the worlds, meaning warns them. He becomes someone who warns them of the day of judgment, that they should prepare for it. So here again we have lam. This is the lam that we need to put our microscope on, or lens on, and this is the inflection that we're concerned with. We said lam here is the agent of nasab, and it comes before one of the an imperfect verb, not one of the 5 verbs. This is also an imperfect verb. Therefore, it makes inflection. It changes the inflection to nasab. And what is the sign of nasab for imperfect verbs?
Again, fatha.
Fatha, yeah. So inshallah, it is clear. I think this is very straightforward, but if you have any questions, now is the time to ask, inshallah.
Brother, still a quick question. Why did it say lamu kai at the beginning?
So lam, okay, this means okay, maybe I should translate it here. It means the lam of K. So what does the lam of K mean? It means that this lam many times comes right before K. Many times this lam comes attached to K. In which case, but sometimes that the K is removed and only lam is left, right? And only lam itself remains. And in that case, lam will become. And obviously, there are different schools of thought about, or there are different scenarios of basically, what I'm trying to say is that this requires more explanation, because it's not as straightforward as I am explaining it right now. There's a lot more explanation that goes into this, but I think that makes sense for this class. But just for now, note that this lam, many times it comes right before K, but if you remove the K, the lam will remain, and it will become an agent of nasab. It will do exactly what K used to do. So that's all you need to know for now. But then the different scenarios and situations that we need to explain, inshallah, we'll explain those in the future classes. Does that make sense, Brother Haidar? Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair. Any other questions?
Check this ya at the beginning of the word. It's part of the imperfect verb, or it's one of those? Yes.
So yeah, we said with the imperfect verb, it always starts with one of those 4 letters, right? Hamza, yeah, what?
Yes.
So that's one of those 4 letters.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me. So that is. Yeah. So I'll translate these 2 verses after the class, inshallah. But yeah, so we have completed the chapter of Arab. Now we have started the chapter of verbs. Now, perhaps now you understand why I put so much emphasis on the chapter of Arab? Because if you had not understood that chapter, you would not be able to understand what we're talking about here.
Yes.
That is why Brother Ma'rajul kept on referring back to the quotes that we to the previous lessons, and the what we studied previously, because that you need what we studied previously to be able to understand the chapter of verbs. So inshallah, it makes sense. The more we study, the more it makes sense why that first chapter is so important. So I did not just tell you to study it for the sake of studying. It is essential to your knowledge of the Arabic language. So inshallah we'll stop here. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakumullahu khairan.